Hello and welcome to episode 5 of 5-minute tutorials on oxygen not included. If you hate those tutorial videos where you're looking up a topic, trying to get some advice, and it ends up being 47 minutes, first 10 minutes of which are somebody just tweaking their base, rambling on and not getting to the point of the video, then this video is for you. Try to keep this under 5 minutes, focused on a particular topic, tips and tricks, and let's get started. Let's not waste your time. So this episode is on managing water. So when you first start your base, you'll have some kind of natural sources of water. You can see this is around where my base started. There were a couple of pockets of water, so the first thing I did was kind of dig little holes, dig little trenches to kind of funnel all the water into one place. Then I built a pitcher pump and gave them access to the water for what they needed to in the system. Research, of course, takes some water. Other things, irrigation and so forth, take some water. And that's one of the main initial sources and uses of water. So I started off, my pitcher pump was originally down here. Actually, it was initially up here. And I started using all my water. I went ahead and built another pitcher pump. I didn't even move the other one, figuring that I would eventually build the water back up. So I've kind of got this still as a backup should my water run low in the system. Early on in the game, you might worry a little bit about water, but later on in the game, through geysers, you're probably going to find a ton of water. And this is probably going to be your number one source once you find a cool steam vent. So a cool steam vent erupts the water at 110 degrees, and all you need to do is cool it a little bit, and it will condense the water. You build a big cistern around it, and you basically have a renewable source of clean water in the system, which is great. Now it's going to be hot. So one of the things you can do with hot water, you can put it directly into your plumbing of your system, your showers, your toilets, and everything like that. Here's my toilets, here's my sinks, and it jumps over here into my showers. The dupes don't care. However, as you run it into your base, of course, it's going to create a little bit of heat in there because of the pipes. So if you have the technology for insulated pipes, those are good. That'll keep a lot of heat from infiltrating into your base. But another thing you can do is cool the water. So once you find your first cold biome, and say up here, this was kind of my main first one, so I built a water pump coming into here. And then that water, in addition to going into this hot zone here, comes all the way up through insulated pipe. Once I hit the cold zone, I change it to radiated pipe. I don't wait until it gets deep into the cold zone. This is actually a anti-entropy nullifier, which is great if you find one, but you don't really have to have one. If you take radiant pipe and you just run it through the cold zone, that water is going to drop a lot of degrees. So here it's coming in at, in this case, 55 degrees. It's coming out at 37 degrees. If you start off with 37 degree water, it's going to come down to about 10 degrees, which is great in the system. And if you really want to, early on in the game, here's another one of my cold zones. And what I did is I actually let this melt a little bit of ice in the system. I created some 5-degree water, and I let my radiative pipes run through this as well. I don't use this cooling loop anymore, but that massively cooled down the water in the system. So in this case, I was using it for my ore refinery and things like that, which really put out a lot of heat. But you can use the same thing for just cooling water that's coming from here. So you can see this water is 57 degrees now, but it actually was a lot hotter when I first started running the steam vent. It was probably 78, 75 degree water. So over time, I have been cooling this water, and as time goes on, it will cool the water even more using this nullifier. Now another thing you'll see is I have a water loop that runs near the vent with a little thermal shift plate. This water doesn't have to be terribly cold. It's 36 degrees. As long as it's below 95 degrees, then basically everything that this cool steam vent puts out will condense. So this steam will turn to water, and I will have a source of water in my system. Got some polluted water. I have no idea where that came from. It's been a problem. I'll have to clean that up. But for the most part, this is clean water in the system. Another way of getting water is as you dig out one of these cold biomes, especially in this case I've gone vertically, there's a bunch of stuff here, and you can see there's ice melting. And so it's pulling out a lot of water, And because I've dug it vertically, it's going to drop all the way down, and I built a little cistern here to catch the water. This water remains pretty cold. It was originally hot. I think I'm putting some hot water from another source into it. But for a while there, this cistern was only 5 degrees, and I used it for a cooling loop in the system. So it's important to think of the water not so much as something that your dupes are going to use for consumption or crops or so forth, but really as a cooling system. So you're going to want to find these cold biomes. You're going to want to eventually run all these insulated and radiant pipes in the system. Insulated pipes are easy. Once you have the technology, they just use rock. Radiative pipes, however, use metal. And so that's going to be a big source of your metal there. Now, one of the nice things is once you dig down, once you kind of get down to not quite where the magma biomes are, but where you can find oil and so forth, you're going to find lead. And lead is nice. It's a refined metal. It's got a fairly low melting point, so it's not great to use in high temperature areas. But where you want to make radiative pipes in a cold area, lead is perfect. It's cheap. When you mine it out, there's going to be tons of it. So to some extent, you want to kind of go in both directions at once. I mean, I don't go up very much. I'll generally go sideways, find the cold biomes, and I'll go down to find the lead and the oil fairly quickly in the system. Because that lead is basically a cheap way. It keeps me from using up copper and gold that I can use for other purposes, and especially iron that I want to use for making steel for high temperature applications. The other thing going into the cold biomes earlier for in addition to getting cold water, is getting these wheezeworts. I don't use a lot of them now. I think I have about 15 extra wheezewort seeds that I haven't even planted in the system. I'm sitting on 13 wort seeds that I'm not using. And again, because I've got these cooling loops going through the system, I don't really need them quite so much. And again, once you find these anti-entropy thermonullifiers, they add a little bit of extra cooling, but again, just running radiative pipe through a cold biome will get you a lot. So here it is, water's coming at 30, it's coming out. Well, this is not cooling terribly great. I guess it depends on the packets. It's not dropping quite so much, but I'm putting a lot of hot water through there. I think, oh, here I've got, this is why. I've got another leg that's running down to cool my plastic plant, which is a really hot section. So that's heating up a lot of the water and making it difficult for this cooling loop. That's why I've got this cistern way up here that went from 5 degrees to 30 degrees. As a lot of that hot water is coming straight back into there. So as you get to mid-game, most of your use of water, you'll have little things like these water coolers and so forth. But bristle blossoms, and if you're doing the ranching that I talked about in some of the earlier episodes, you're probably not going to use a lot. In fact, I got this little mini liquid pump because I didn't want to use quite so much electricity of a full pump. Again, take some extra research and technology, but it'll feed my bristle blossoms just fine. I could have run one of these other loops into it, but the problem is this water can get pretty warm, and I didn't want to overheat my bristle blossoms, because they do have a temperature limit of 30 degrees. So if you run water that's too hot to them, you could kill them off or keep them from growing. So that's primarily it about water. I'll show you one other trick that I've done. As you can see, I've got this melted ice and everything in here. So one of the things I did in my cooling loop, this cooling loop comes through here, and as it gets down to a little lower cistern here, I have a liquid filter, and this liquid filter will basically filter out the polluted water, and it lets it continue in the cooling loop, and the little bit of fresh water drops into the cistern. So I'm basically taking this cistern way up here, I'm pumping it out, the polluted water continues in the cooling loop, and this fresh water drops out. Now, why am I dropping the fresh water instead of the polluted water? Polluted water has a wider temperature range for heating and cooling. So generally when you're running cooling loops, using it as a coolant, especially in an ore refinery or something like that, you want to use polluted water because it's a wider temperature range. It doesn't freeze quite as easily and break your pipes, or it doesn't turn to vapor quite as easily and break your pipes. So all of my heating and cooling loops, I try to stay with polluted water as much as possible. So that's kind of the last point. You can see I've built some water seeds and so forth. I don't run them very much because polluted water is just so valuable otherwise in the heating and cooling loops here. I think I've really kind of almost shut down the water seed entirely. So that's it. Hope you found the video useful. If you like it, comment, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video, managing oxygen and hydrogen.